Welcome into the College Football Recruiting Show. I'm Grace Remington, filling in for Emily Proud. Blair Angulo also joining me today. Please remember to send in your viewer questions in the live chat because we will be answering them at the end of the show. Now let's start it off with the biggest headlines of the day. We are on Flip Watch for the #1 player in the 2024 class. Steve Wiltfong has flipped the crystal ball for quarterback Dylan Raiola from Ohio State to Georgia. Raiola decommitted from the Buckeyes in December and has been trending toward the Bulldogs in recent weeks. Blair, what would his commitment mean for Georgia?
Yeah, it would be huge. Georgia was actually the early favorite to land Dylan Raiola before USC grasped the momentum, and then he ultimately announced commitment to Ohio State. The Bulldogs have not signed a five-star quarterback in the 24/7 Sports rankings since 2018.
All right, we'll have more news on Raiola later in the show with our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, so stay tuned for that. All right, perhaps some trouble in the swamp. Five-star quarterback and Florida signee Jaden Rashada is not yet enrolled at the university and has not moved in with the rest of the program's early enrollees. That's according to Jacob Rudner of Swamp 24/7. He was expected to enroll and arrive on campus after the Under Armour All-American game on January 3rd. So, Blair, Rashada signed a grant in aid, not an NLI. Can you explain the significance of those documents and what could be holding Rashada back from putting pen to paper on the NLI?
Yeah, he's finalizing everything, it seems like, to get to Gainesville. A grant in aid binds the school to the player, while an NLI grants the player to the school. So he's obviously still, in a way, it's still up in the market.
All right, and keep an eye on Swamp 24/7 for the latest on Rashada. USC is trending for Texas A&M defensive line transfer Anthony Lucas, per Steve Wiltfong. The Arizona native is a five-star in the 2022 class. Our own Chris Hummer, Brandon Marcello, and Jason Shear have also crystal balled him to the Trojans. USC currently has a top 5 class in the 2023 transfer portal team rankings. Blair, what kind of boost would Lucas provide for Lincoln Riley's defense?
Yeah, we see him on that film there at A&M. He has a lot of versatility. He can play edge, he can play defensive tackle, and when you need players up front like the USC Trojans do, he would be a pivotal piece for what they want to do defensively next season.
And we'll get a commitment from one of the top offensive tackles in the 2024 class pretty soon. Four-star Cam Pringle says he will announce his decision on January 22nd. His top 6 schools include South Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, NC State, and Clemson, with the Gamecocks as the crystal ball favorite. Blair, what will it take to keep Pringle in his home state?
Yeah, less than 2 weeks to go, so it'll be the same persistence that Coach Shane Beamer has shown with Cam Pringle since he took the helm 2 years ago. That could make the difference. The Gamecocks just signed a top 20 recruiting class. 7 4-stars are already enrolled on campus. Pringle would be a very nice compliment for QB Dante Reno. He's a 4-star quarterback from Connecticut. He's already committed in the 2024 class.
All right, we got a big night coming up on CBS Sports HQ. The MaxPreps National Player of the Year will be revealed at 7 o'clock Eastern. Now, to talk more about these award finalists, let's bring in MaxPreps National Football. Oops, sorry, we got something for you guys to listen to.
Bishop Gorman ran through their competition out in Las Vegas, and the biggest reason for that was the play of their quarterback, Micah Alejado. His stats are absolutely jaw-dropping. In 15 games, he tossed 54 touchdown passes while only throwing 2 interceptions. If not for a razor-thin loss to last year's national champion Mater Dei, the Gales would have had as good a case as any for national champions. But the future's looking bright in the desert. As the only junior finalist for MaxPreps Player of the Year, you can be sure Alejado and Bishop Gorman are set to make some big noise in 2023.
Football is religion in Texas, and sticking out there means you're doing big things, which is precisely how you describe former Denton Guyer quarterback Jackson Arnold. Coming off a monster junior season, he didn't slow down one bit in his senior campaign. The dynamic dual threat tossed 33 touchdown passes, only 3 picks, while adding 24 touchdowns on the ground. And he did all that against the best competition in Texas, finishing 14-1 and falling just short of winning a state title. It might have been a tough year for the Oklahoma Sooners, but help is on the way, the form of Jackson Arnold.
Ruben Bain is a quarterback's worst nightmare. Despite being double-teamed on just about every play, his senior season stats almost needed to be seen to be believed. 29 sacks and 39 tackles for loss in just 11 games. Whoever their opponents threw out trying to block Bain, it was a mismatch, including a dominating performance against perennial powerhouse IMG Academy. And those stats translated directly into wins. Miami Central ran the table, going 14-0 and finishing as the top school in the state of Florida and second overall in the final MaxPreps team rankings. As the Miami Hurricanes commit will be terrorizing quarterbacks on Saturdays in the fall, this is a player clearly just scratching the surface of his potential.
Caleb Downs has been in the national spotlight for 4 years now, as he's been a MaxPreps All-American each season. While safety is his natural position, Downs is a playmaker in every sense of the word. He's a ball hawk on one side and a touchdown machine on the other. In total, his senior campaign included 25 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 2 pick sixes, while leading Mill Creek to their first ever state championship. And while Downs will be balling out for Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide in the fall, his accomplishments in high school football are the stuff of legends.
There's yet another great running back in the city of San Diego. Roderick Robinson looks to join the likes of Marcus Allen, Terrell Davis, Rashawn Salam, Ricky Williams, and Reggie Bush. They've accomplished everything from the Heisman Trophy to the Hall of Fame. Roderick Robinson, in his senior year of high school, tallied nearly 2,400 yards on the ground. He ran for 11 yards a pop and 39 touchdowns. UCLA tried to keep him in state, but Robinson is going to be heading across the country to play for Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs, where he'll have a chance to make an immediate impact for the current gold standard program in college football.
All right, those are your finalists for MaxPreps National Player of the Year. To talk more about these stellar athletes and this award process, let's bring in MaxPreps National Football Editor Zach Poff. Zach, we saw the 5 finalists there vying for some hardware tonight. How did these players stand out from their peers?
Yeah, I mean, really what it comes down to are 2 things. Obviously, individual performance, but most importantly, team success. So you saw 4 of the 5 finalists. They led their teams to state titles this year. And the only one that did not was Jackson Arnold of Denton Guyer. He led them to a 14-1 record and to the 6A Division II state semifinals in Texas, which is one of the toughest playoff brackets. So those are really the 2 deciding factors when it comes to announcing the All-American team, along with these 5 finalists for MaxPreps Player of the Year.
Yeah, so let's run through these finalists, starting with junior quarterback Micah Alejado out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. He led Bishop Gorman to a 14-1 record, the only junior on this list. So what was it about his game that landed him here?
Yeah, I mean, you just look at Bishop Gorman this year. They finished the year ranked at number 4 in the country. They won a state title in Nevada, which they pretty much do every season. But you just look at the numbers he put up. He threw for over 3,500 yards, but had 54 touchdown passes to only 2 interceptions, playing against the elite competition, and in the only loss, they lost to Mater Dei, and he threw for more yards than any other quarterback that faced Mater Dei this year. So he had a big-time season, and really the crazy thing for them is they won every game by at least 35 points this season, so he didn't even really play much in the second half because those games were already decided by halftime.
Yeah, when you look at this list, Zach, Micah Alejado, maybe not the biggest prospect, not only in stature, but obviously in his own way as a recruit. But, you know, you mentioned it, right? A big-time gamer with some production, a lot of performances when the lights are brightest. He's really impressive. I'm excited to see him as a senior next fall. Moving on to the next guy, Jackson Arnold, huge year. What made him a standout and one of these finalists on the MaxPreps Player of the Year?
Yeah, I mean, it really looked like Denton Guyer was going to bring home that state title this year, but unfortunately ran into DeSoto in the semifinals. But you just look at the production Jackson Arnold put up. They're playing against elite competition in the state of Texas. He had a huge junior season and answered that with an even bigger senior campaign. And Oklahoma fans, don't worry. I know you guys just had a tough year, but once Jackson Arnold gets there, things are going to turn around quick. This is a guy who put up 4,400 yards of total offense and had 57 touchdowns, 33 through the air, and 24 on the ground.
Our third finalist, defensive end Ruben Bain. He is the number 10 edge in the 2023 class, and he is staying home at Miami. We know Mario's getting a good one. Bain put up 29 sacks in his senior season. How was he able to emerge as a finalist for this award?
I mean, it's crazy to think because he had a dominant junior season. He answered that with an even bigger senior campaign. Now, you know you're a big deal if you're wearing number 4 for Miami Central. You know, the Cook brothers both rock that number. And he put up 29 sacks. But the game that really jumped off for me was the season opener when they beat IMG Academy. He dominated that offensive line. And you look at that offensive line, it's all Power 5 guys for IMG Academy. And he led Miami Central to its first ever undefeated season. Miami Central's had some big-time seasons and some big-time teams, but no team went undefeated, and it was all under the leadership of Ruben Bain this year from Miami Central.
Caleb Downs is also on this list, Zach. He's the number 1 safety in the 2023 class, headed to play on the defensive side of the ball at Alabama. But he did it in every facet, right? He played offense, he played defense, he did some special teams there at Mill Creek in Georgia. What stands out to you about Caleb Downs?
I think that the thing that's really special with Caleb Downs, whether he is on offense or defense this year, so when he's on defense, the opposing offense really had to key in on him on defense, but it was the same thing when he was on offense. He impacted the game on all 3 levels, was also a standout on special teams. But most importantly, he led Mill Creek to its first ever state title. They finished the year ranked at number 11 in the final MaxPreps top 25 national poll, and they were the top-ranked team in Georgia. And every week, man, Caleb Downs, this dude just balled out. He's one of those rare guys, too, when it comes to consistency. He was a MaxPreps freshman All-American, a sophomore All-American, a junior All-American, and then he ends up being on the MaxPreps first team All-American at the all-purpose position.
Our last finalist is Roderick Robinson. The 4-star running back out of California is headed cross-country to play for the back-to-back champs, Georgia. Now, this 2023 class had a lot of talent in the backfield, so how did Robinson stand out from the crowd?
It's just funny because, like, you know, for Thanksgiving when you get the whole family together and you go have the little turkey bowl and you got that dad or uncle who's just bigger than all the little kids trying to tackle him. That was basically defenses trying to tackle Roderick Robinson this season. He ran for nearly 2,400 yards, had 37 touchdowns, but really the way he performed in the playoffs is what made him a finalist and the state player of the year in California. He ran for over 200 yards against De La Salle and 4 touchdowns and brought home the first state title in Lincoln history. And this is a school that's produced running backs like Marcus Allen and Terrell Davis. You can add Roderick Robinson to that list of all-time greats that were a Lincoln Hornet.
Really impressive. Well, congratulations are in order to all 5 of those guys. Thank you, Zach, for your time, for joining us today. And remember, the MaxPreps National Player of the Year will be revealed tonight live on CBS Sports HQ. Tune in at 7 o'clock Eastern. The top high school seniors in the class of 2023 met in San Antonio this past Saturday for the All-American Bowl. The East team beat the West by a convincing final score of 55-17. Our own Andrew Ivins and Cooper Petagna had their boots on the ground in the Alamo City. Here's their All-American Bowl superlatives.
All right, Drew, we've made it back from San Antonio in one piece. A great week at the All-American Bowl, loaded with tons of talent from coast to coast. So I got to ask, your MVP of the week, quite simply, who was it for you?
Well, Coop, I'm leaning towards you on this one. You were there for all the practices. I only caught one of them in the actual game, but Keon Keely, the Viking from Norway. We didn't know he had visited Norway so many times. We learned that he had been there, I think almost 11 times throughout his youth. Mom came over from the Scandinavian country. No, this Alabama-bound pass rusher, we thought he was good. I don't think we knew he was this good. You're talking about a guy that had a sack, a pass breakup in the actual game, go to those one-on-ones in practices, and we had never seen him against the best of the best in the nation. But, man, he is everything we thought he could be. Over 6'4", can transition speed to power. And the scary part is he's probably still not playing his best football. So I thought Keon Keely was the real deal. Coop, I know you're just as high on him.
The Viking, also known as the Northman. I mean, this guy also sings in the choir as well. What can't he do? But he had a phenomenal week, Drew. Coming into the week, he was a number 1 rated defensive prospect in the top 247, sitting there as a number 4 prospect overall. And we're leaving San Antonio thinking that that might be a little bit low for Keon Keely. He dominated this week from start to finish. A smooth pass rusher, has everything in his arsenal, can beat you with speed, can beat you with power. And he lived up to the hype, not only through the week, but on Saturday. as well. So, Drew, our MVP, Keon Keely. But as we transition to another topic, Drew, there was another guy that gave Keon Keely a run on Saturday, and he figures to be one of the most collegiate-ready prospects at the next level. That is UCLA-bound quarterback Dante Moore.
Yeah, and one of my buddies is a big UCLA fan, and I texted him in the first quarter, know the name Dante Moore, and he's just a casual, right? So if you're a casual, get familiar with this guy. I would not be surprised if Dante Moore, right now our number 3 quarterback, I would not be surprised if he is starting games in 2023. Completed his first 3 passes of the game, right? Then he throws a touchdown strike to Jaylen Brown, the LSU wide receiver signee. 12 seconds later, after a turnover, he hits Brandon Ennis in the corner of the end zone. So that's 2 touchdown passes. Then he had 2 more after that. He finds Carnell Tate with what I think was his throw over the day, squeezed it right into coverage over the middle for 6 points. And then throwing it around a defensive end, hits Justice Haynes out of the backfield. Look, this was one of the best quarterback performances I've ever seen in this type of setting. Dante Moore, he was sharp, he was efficient, he was taking hits. His helmet got popped off a few times. This guy looks like he has the goods, everything we thought he would be. Chip Kelly is getting a good one, and Dante Moore, this guy has the resume. He is battle tested, and I keep saying it. Look, hey, Moore, this guy has the resume. He is battle tested, and I keep saying it. Look, hey, Cade Klubnik, if Connor Wegman, those guys could play as freshmen this year, then Dante Moore, he can probably start as a freshman and win games at UCLA.
He had a solid week, but when the lights came on Saturday, he was a completely different player. This is a guy 40-11 in his career over 4 years at Martin Luther King. We've been accustomed to big-time performances from Dante Moore. Saturday was no different. And Drew, you said it, he's got the goods. I think this is a guy that can step in day one in Hollywood, play for Chip Kelly. Beautiful fit there. Drew, we're going to stick with the quarterbacks. One of the biggest surprises this week, a guy that has risen late in the rankings and was a late addition to this game, but that is top 150 player, California quarterback Aidan Childs. He is on his way to Oregon State. Drew, I know Childs throughout the week impressed not only me and you, but everybody with his play in San Antonio.
Went to dinner with our buddy Tom Loy on Saturday night. We're just talking about players we loved. Aidan Childs was a name that kept coming up over and over again. We leave the restaurant on the Riverwalk. Lo and behold, Aidan Childs is standing right there, and I gave him a big congratulations. I think he's going to be a guy me and you are going to cheer for on Saturdays, a little Pac-12 after dark. How he moves in the pocket is so unique for this 2023 class of arms. And this is a group that we've been saying all along is super talented. And I think Aidan Childs is a name that hasn't been discussed enough on the national level. Missed some time as a junior due to injury, but man, under the lights, he led the game in passing yards, close to 178 yards. I thought the most encouraging thing was how he moves in the pocket. And we know he's a run-first guy, or not a run-first guy. We know he's a guy that can beat you with his legs, but he stands in there, goes through his progressions, and makes some nice, accurate throws on the run. I think Oregon State is getting a good one, and I wouldn't be surprised if a few years from now we look back and we're like, how did the SEC, how did USC, how did UCLA not go on Aidan Childs? He, too, looks like he has the goods.
Love the fit up in Corvallis with head coach Jonathan Smith. Oregon State coming off a 10-win season, their first in 16 years. So Aidan Childs, a name to look out for the next 3 to 4 years in the Pac-12 footprint. All right, Drew, the team that stood out to you that had a bevy of players throughout the weekend, and it shouldn't be a shock, the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the country, Nick Saban, does it again. But these guys were making plays all over the field. That is Alabama, the Crimson Tide.
What did I say on signing day? The Empire strikes back after it became clear that Alabama was signing its 10th top number 1 ranked recruiting class in the past 13 years. Look, when I was in Orlando for the Under Armour game, some of the guys that were signed with Alabama, they didn't end up playing, whether that was because of injury. But I think you can make a case in terms of guys that we saw in San Antonio that we think could probably make an impact year one. Alabama had the most. We have already discussed Keon Keely at length. How about Caleb Downs, the safety from Georgia, Gatorade Player of the Year? We've said it in our airspace multiple times, Cooper. This might be one of the safest prospects we've seen in a very, very long time. He had an interception in the game. He was coming up in the A-gap, making tackles. He was covering tight ends in the slot, maybe, got some looks out on the outside and coverage as well. And he also ran in a touchdown of a little wildcat formation. We loved him. And I think you are super high on that pass rusher, Yanze Pierre, who took a big shot at Dante Moore. I'd never seen anything like it. Dante's helmet came off. If it was a real game, I think he would have been ejected, but it was an all-star game, so they kept him in there. But no, Alabama's group looks pretty good, and the rich get richer.
I love Yanze Pierre. We spent a lot of time talking about Keon Keely already. We didn't even talk about the number one offensive lineman in the country. That is Caden Proctor, who the Crimson Tide flipped from Iowa late in the process. And what about Justice Haynes, Drew? I mean, me and you got off a call earlier saying Justice Haynes could be the number one running back in the country. He showed everything this week. I think he's the most complete running back in the country. A 3-down back, can get it done on the ground and through the air as well. Alabama reloading as a lot of talent on the way to Tuscaloosa.
Jim Harbaugh isn't giving up on the NFL just yet. According to reports, the Michigan head coach is a top candidate for the Denver Broncos head coaching job. And this comes after reports saying he's already interviewed with the Carolina Panthers. Last week, Harbaugh released a statement saying, "While no one knows what the future holds, I expect I will be enthusiastically coaching Michigan in 2023. Interesting statement there. Let's bring in Alan Trieu, our national recruiting analyst, for more. Alan, for 2 straight years now, Harbaugh has entertained interest from the NFL. The Wolverines' 2023 class sits at 17th nationally. So before we talk about his future, how did last year's coaching cycle impact his recruiting performance?
Yeah, I think people thought that the 2023 class would be a little bit more higher ranked for Michigan, coming off of a college football playoff appearance and a Big Ten title. It still finishes inside the top 20, but I think people were expecting a top 10 finish out of that class. Now, how much those rumors impacted the final standing in that class, hard to tell. I do think that Michigan picked up a lot of momentum as the fall went on. I think the good thing for them now, though, is that this is the second straight year they've gone through this, and so you can be a little bit more prepared for starting off this 2024 class a little bit faster.
Yeah, Alan, they could be rumors. There's a lot of question marks, and I think that recruits and their families obviously have a lot of questions for that program. But what kind of uncertainty does this leave Michigan with right now, with players like Nicholas Harbaugh, with players like Jaden Davis, whom the Wolverines have been perceived to be among the favorites for?
Yeah, I think there is uncertainty. It does sound like Jaden Davis and other players in that 2024 class want to wait and see what happens here, and that's no surprise there. I do think that this needs to get resolved quickly in order for Michigan to move on in the recruiting trail or stay as status quo if he is still the head coach at Michigan. Either way, I don't think the lingering rumors help them at the moment. You're only going to have a couple of weekends left to recruit guys like Nicholas Harbaugh. They're still on Jamel Howard out of Chicago Marist in the 2023 class, but I think they want to make sure this doesn't affect their 2024 recruiting. And Jaden Davis is certainly the big fish in that class right now, but Michigan's scheduled to have a couple of junior days later this month where they can get those players around the staff and hopefully put some of those concerns at ease in person.
Yeah, Alan, as the attention shifts to the 2024 class, once again, Michigan dealing with this uncertainty for the second year in a row. So to avoid repeating that slow start they had in 2023, how is Michigan dealing with the possibility of their coach leaving yet again?
I think scheduling these 2 January junior days is a big part of that. And I do think that was the plan regardless of these rumors, because this has been in the works. But this is going to let them get kids on campus a little bit earlier, let them get out of the gate a little bit sooner. And like I said, they've dealt with this last year. And I do think that the staff is a really good recruiting staff. They have good relationships with the players. So as long as the staff gets retained, I don't think it'll end up affecting the class too much, as long as guys like Sharon Moore, Mike Hart, Ron Bellamy, Steve Klingscale, Mike Elston, they've all made big marks on the recruiting trail this year. And if they're in Ann Arbor, I think the 2024 class will be just fine.
Alan, there's also that recently announced NCAA investigation into Michigan and into Harbaugh. How could that affect recruiting for the Wolverines moving forward?
I think that has to resolve itself a little bit too. I don't think at the moment it's going to affect recruiting too much. Maybe it affects Jim's decision to stay or leave a little bit, but hasn't come up so far on the recruiting trail. And depending on what kind of punishment gets levied down on that, then it could, you see what kind of impact it has from there. But at the moment, I think that's another wait and see type situation.
All right, well, for now, Jim Harbaugh is still the head man. But if he were to leave, who does Michigan turn to for his replacement, Alan? I
think you have a couple of candidates in the building already. Sharon Moore's name gets brought up quite a bit. Mike Hart who's an alum. His name gets brought up quite a bit. Sharon is coming off of 2 straight Joe Moore awards and has done a really good job taking over as not only the offensive line coach, but co-offensive coordinator there. A name that I've heard brought up for several years now is Harold Goodwin, who's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's an alum. He's got some ties to Michigan, and you never know what other names will come up off of the radar. But in the moment, I think those are the 2 names within the building, and then Harold Goodwin is a name that seems to frequently come up when you talk about potential next Michigan coaches as well.
Yeah, they like to keep those Michigan men in Ann Arbor. All right, thanks for joining us, Alan. Appreciate you. Now, Blair, keeping the conversation going, even if Michigan hires a coach from within and they keep that staff intact, how far behind do you think they would be in the 2024 class if Harbaugh were to leave?
Well, if they do hire from within, I think it would be a positive step towards them being able to retain a lot of the momentum that they've built on the college football playoff appearances, right? They've reached it for back-to-back seasons. They are a team that I think has regained its status among the elite nationally. And Jim Harbaugh has done that. And now if you hire from within, you continue to have maybe that same mindset as a recruiting staff. You continue to have the same recruiting board and an identity. That's going to help them alleviate things. So, whereas I think a lot of fans would want them to take a look and make sure they hire the perfect replacement for Jim Harbaugh. If they do hire from within, I think it would make up for some of that on a recruiting standpoint. They'd be able to flow and continue that momentum a bit more.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to hire someone from within who knows the systems, knows the process, and knows the recruits too. All right, let's turn the page to 2024 with a look inside the recruitment of some of the top players in the class. Only 2 of the top 10 are committed, as you see on your screen there. Now, for more on these prospects, let's bring in our 24 Sports Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, your crystal ball for quarterback Jaden Davis has been on Michigan since October. He's the number 2 quarterback in the top 24/7 ranking. So how strongly are you favoring the Wolverines in this race?
Time with Jaden Davis and his father this past weekend in San Antonio as they were in town for the All-America Bowl festivities. Jaden's going to play in the game next year. And I still think that Michigan has the momentum in this recruitment. But as y'all talked about with Allen there, Jim Harbaugh's name is being floated around for potential NFL jobs. And I think with that, the antenna is up in the Davis camp on what's going to happen there. And they've continued to keep regular communication with several other programs. Clemson is a program that has been a dream offer of his since the 5th grade. He's been there numerous times. They offered on June 1st. He has a great relationship with Brandon Streeter in that class and knows the place well. I think Penn State, James Franklin, and the entire staff went and visited him at Providence Day in December when coaches could be on the road. And Mike Yursich and Danny O'Brien and those guys have made an impression on Jaden as well. Tennessee's a program that it's really heating up with Jaden and the amount that they've talked. And one of the reasons why he's so high on Michigan is the reason why he's high on Tennessee. Both those head football coaches have experience under center. They were terrific college football players. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh was a terrific player in the NFL. And I think that's something that speaks to Jaden as well. So we'll see what happens at Michigan. That'll tell us what probably happens with Jaden Davis. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State came back around on Jaden Davis. I think there was a time where the Buckeyes were in terrific position for him. And then Dylan Raiola committed. Now Dylan Raiola is no longer part of Ohio State's class. The Buckeyes are searching for a 2024 quarterback again, and they certainly had Jaden Davis high on their board.
Steve, I love the segue. Talking about Raiola, he's ranked ahead of Jaden Davis in the quarterback rankings, the number 1 overall prospect in the 2024 class, decommitted from the Buckeyes in December, and obviously a lot of programs are after his signature. But we mentioned earlier in the show that you flipped your crystal ball to Georgia. What's got you feeling good about the Bulldogs?
Well, my pick was on Ohio State, and we know it's not going to be the Buckeyes, so I had to roll out of there. But I do think that Georgia has set the tone in this recruitment as it moves forward. But there's some other contenders. You have Oregon, who's heavily in the mix. A lot of dialogue with several Duck staffers. USC, Lincoln Riley. His track record developing the quarterback position is something that's also very exciting, along with the offensive style. And really the personal relationship that he has with Lincoln Riley. When Lincoln Riley zeroes in on a quarterback, he's the one that's leading the charge on the trail. So I think that Dylan feels close to Lincoln Riley. And then Nebraska, all the family ties to the Huskers. He's a major target, obviously, for Matt Rule and that new staff. And I think that he's interested in seeing what those guys build at Nebraska. His uncle's on staff there. So Nebraska's enticing. But Georgia, he was at the national championship game last night. He called Georgia the cream of the crop, says they do everything with such class and they do everything the right way. He talked about the fans, just talked about what Kirby Smart has done, building it into a powerhouse program for his alma mater, and said it's a special place and he can't wait to get back to Athens. No visits set. I think the 4 schools I mentioned are prominently in the mix. That doesn't mean there won't be other contenders for him as he dives back into the recruiting process and sees what's out there.
Well, right behind Raiola in the 2024 player rankings is safety KJ Boldin. The number 2 player in the class has no crystal ball predictions right now, but in-state Georgia, once again, seems firmly near the top of his list. What's his recruitment looking like, Steve?
Yeah, this, we had Texas A&M with the best recruiting class in 24/7 sports history 2 years ago, and Alabama with the second best this year. I think Georgia might top that in 2024. If I had to put a pick in right now, I'd put it in for Georgia for KJ Boldin, but there's a lot of contenders. That one could change. He's supposed to be at Georgia this coming weekend where they're going to probably celebrate another national championship. Alabama in 2 weeks. He likes Clemson a lot. Tennessee. Florida State was kind of his dream school growing up. LSU is another school that's kind of coming into the picture. And then Ohio State is very much in the lead group, in my opinion. If I had to make a lead group, Georgia, Ohio State, Bama, and then the other 4 I think are very much in the thick of it as well.
KJ Boldin's teammate, Edric Houston at Buford, is another top-rated prospect in that 2024 class, Steve. And we saw how teammates were, in a way, going through the recruiting process together in this 2023 recruiting cycle. So how do Boldin's and Houston's recruitment overlap?
Well, they're going to do their own thing. I think that these are guys that are going through their own processes respectively, but they do have a lot of the same schools. When you talk about Mr. Houston here, I know he's high on Georgia, likes Alabama, Clemson, certainly school that's caught his eye, and a program that is not in KJ's list, that's on his list, is Michigan State. He really likes the Spartans there. They're a program to keep an eye on for him with what they've done under Mel Tucker and company. And so we got Alabama. We talked Georgia. In Ohio State, they're the 5th school for him as well.
The number 2 safety in the 2024 class, Jalen Hayward, set to announce his college decision on Friday. His top 6 includes Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, and Florida. So with his announcement just a few days away, what's the status of his recruitment?
Well, what's the theme of this little segment we have going on here, y'all? Georgia. I have a 24/7 sports crystal ball logged for the Bulldogs. I put it in during the fall. I feel great about it going into his decision. I think his relationship with Fran Brown is terrific. I think the opportunity to play for Coach Brown, Coach Muschamp, and Coach Kirby Smart's exciting to him. I think he loved his visit to Athens, loves the trajectory of the program, the style of the defense. And I think when he announces his decision on Friday, he's going to be part of a Georgia class that's already ranked number 1.
Steve, Sammy Brown is the top linebacker in 2024. He's also out of the state of Georgia. You have to think that the Bulldogs are right there for him. No crystal balls yet for the 5-star, but what's the latest with Sammy Brown?
Well, there's been times where I've been close to logging one for Georgia for Sammy Brown, talking to him and his family throughout the process. I know he loves Georgia, loves Coach Schumann. I don't know if there's a coach in college football that he's closer with than Georgia's defensive coordinator, Glenn Schumann. They already have DeMarcus Riddick committed at the linebacker position. They would love to add Sammy Brown to that, and that'd be their 2 guys at linebacker. Clemson is the main competition, in my opinion, for Georgia. He's been camping there for, his entire life. Clemson normally offers prospects on June 1 each cycle. So like Jaden Davis, who we talked about, was this past June 1, along with the other priority 2024s. Sammy Brown got his offer before June 1 because they're just so familiar with him. They've had him in camp so many years. They wanted to make that offer special. You're the first player that Clemson's offering in the 2024 cycle. So I think that Dabo Swinney and Coach Goodwin and those guys made an impression there. Ohio State's in there. Notre Dame's in there. Oklahoma, Brent Venables, of course, that relationship is longstanding with Venables as well. But I kind of like Georgia by a hair right now, with Clemson very much at near the top of the list as well.
All right, let's go down to Texas. Colin Simmons out of Duncanville is the number 3 edge in the 2024 class and the number 3 player in the Lone Star State. Now, you would think that the top in-state programs like Texas A&M, Texas, TCU are pursuing him, but Steve, you're crystal balling him to LSU. So how firmly in the driver's seat are the Tigers with this recruitment?
Well, that's a pulse pick. I think LSU's done a terrific job with Colin Simmons, led by Jamar Cain. They've had him on campus a bunch, and I think that he feels at home in Baton Rouge, but there's some major competition. You mentioned those in-state schools. They're all coming hard. He's been to TCU a lot. He liked he thought that Texas, the trajectory of what they did this season was really exciting for him, and he enjoys the vibe in Austin. He's going to visit Georgia this weekend, so he's going to be there, watch them hoist another crystal ball. Georgia's certainly a program that could be on the rise with Colin Simmons, and he loves the way that Georgia's defensive line plays, so they're certainly a contender. There's a lot of schools in the mix for him. He mentioned wanting to learn more about Michigan State, Ohio State, and Penn State, but I think you got LSU certainly in it. Georgia's got a chance to make a major move this weekend, and you got Texas, Texas A&M, and TCU, among others, in the Colin Simmons sweepstakes.
Steve, let's stay in the SEC and talk a little Tennessee. The crystal ball favors the Vols right now for Ryan Wingo. He's the number 4 weighted wide receiver in the 2024 class. Are they still the pick right now for you, or who else could emerge in his recruitment?
Yeah, I like where Tennessee stands. And as a matter of fact, guys, he's going to be in Knoxville this weekend for the Vols Junior Day, which is going to include Tennessee's basketball game against Kentucky. I think that Coach Heupel's offense and the way that receivers were able to have so many explosive plays is enticing. And there's not a program recruiting him harder than Tennessee right now, but there are other major contenders in this one. He's going to visit Texas A&M the following weekend. Then he's going to go to Colorado at the end of the month, but Oregon, Notre Dame, Miami, USC, Penn State. There's a lot of schools pushing in. Of course, Missouri. He went and visited in-state Missouri in December for a basketball game. He's been there for a game. Coach Drinkwitz and company have a knack for landing the best players in-state, so Mizzou's certainly high on his list. But I like where Tennessee stands for Ryan Wingo as we go into these winter visits that will take us into the spring.
All right. Thanks, Steve. No one has more scoops than this guy, so remember to catch the latest recruiting intel on Wiltfong Whip Around every Monday and Friday on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. All right, Blair, you've been asking a lot of questions. What do you say we get you to answer some? Let's get to some viewer questions here. Thank you to everyone for sending these in the live chat. And remember to subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel so that you can send those questions in every week. All right, what do we got? First, Blair, our questions from Tyler Chambers. This is a good one. Which player in the 2023 class on the defensive side do you think has the best chance of making an immediate impact?
I'm going to go with Anthony Hill, the 5-star linebacker who we just saw this last week in San Antonio at the All-American Bowl. And I think it's because of need, right? I think Texas needs that big pillar in the middle of the defense, a guy that can get after the football, attack those gaps, be physical when he has to. He has the athleticism to cover as well when you need him to get outside the box. He really is physical at the point of attack, can shed blocks, is a terrific run stopper. And that was one big component missing for Texas this last season. When they did show strides, they just didn't have enough defensive talent. I think Anthony Hill steps foot on campus in Austin and becomes an instant contributor right away for that defense.
So many ways to answer that question. I feel like any of the edge rushers, the Carver Montgomery twins or Keon Keely at Alabama, that would be my pick.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a cop-out answer, too.
And we saw all those guys at All-American Bowl make that type of impact as well. But then I also know the type of players that are already on those rosters. Yeah. And so the potential for impact maybe isn't as high. But there's no question that they have all the upside. They have all the physical tools to contribute right away. The depth chart maybe just isn't working in their favor.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to E. Proud. What might be holding Jaden Rashada back from going to Florida?
Well, this is a really interesting recruitment because when it mattered, right, when he made that decision early on, there were so many different factors. When he flipped from Miami to Florida, there's been talks of NIL and how much that has influenced his recruitment as well. So for him to not step foot on campus, for him not to get to Gainesville, it kind of just leaves you wondering, or maybe it leaves you scratching your head a little bit and wondering, okay, what's going on with Florida and maybe their NIL situation with Jaden Rashada. And, this is one of those things where he was supposed to go to Gainesville straight from the Under Armour game in Orlando, Florida earlier this year. He doesn't make it out there. He's back in the Bay Area at home. And so we're going to see now and be in a wait and see mode with Jaden Rashada to see if maybe other schools go in there and try to make a push, knowing that he's not with the Florida Gators yet.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's not official, anyone can slide in there. And maybe it's just me. I have a lot of Gator fans on my timeline, but I think Billy Napier really needs this momentum. He's lost a lot of those in-state battles. So I don't know, that one could get interesting. Okay, our next question from Dominate. Do you think NIL is playing a role in Dylan Raiola's recruitment?
I mean, I think we'd be naive to say it doesn't play a role anymore, right? And when he initially made that commitment to Ohio State, I think we all wondered and we all assumed that he was going through the process so quickly and so swiftly that he was leaving a lot of opportunities from an NIL perspective on the table. He was kind of just forgetting about all that and just choosing Ohio State for the program, for Ryan Day, for that offense, for the ability to go out there and be a big-time playmaker. But now that he takes a step back, I think it allows a lot of other schools to make their pitch and say, hey, look, this is what we can offer you from a branding opportunity, or here's some endorsements that you'll be able to maybe accumulate if you come here. So now I do think maybe his eyes are a little bit more wide or a little bit more cognizant of what's going on. And remember, his father played in the NFL. He's got an uncle who coaches at Nebraska. So he's very well versed in the recruiting process and very well versed about making money at the next level, making money in the NFL. And so, I don't think it's the biggest selling point for him from a recruiting standpoint, but I do think he will now be paying attention to it.
All right, our next question from Jeff Bama Creeker. How much do you think the annual Jim Harbaugh to the NFL rumors hurts Michigan recruiting each year?
I think it affects them, and that's the unfortunate circumstance of being in that position if you're a Michigan fan, right? Jim Harbaugh had success in the NFL. He comes and rebuilds that program and I think has put it up in that echelon that I think a lot of fans want to see that program consistently, but now you have to fend off the NFL and you have to worry that, maybe he sees that as a goal or as an objective that he was not able to accomplish, and that's winning a Super Bowl. So I think he wants to do that still. There's just too much smoke around that situation, and it seems like it's a yearly thing. So from a recruiting standpoint, it affects it because there's so much uncertainty about the future of the program. You don't want to go to Michigan if you're a recruit wondering who your head coach is going to be. Even next year, the year after, you want to know that Jim Harbaugh will be there for the entire tenure of your stay in Ann Arbor. So I think it raises a lot of question marks, and obviously it affects the way Michigan's able to pitch itself to recruits.
Yeah, that's the drawback when you have success, back-to-back playoff appearances. Your coach is going to get looks, so got to have a backup plan. All right, our next question coming from Alvin Proud. Georgia's secondary shut down TCU yesterday. What does Peyton Woodyard bring to the program when he gets to Athens in a few seasons?
He's going to bring a lot of physicality, a big-time safety prospect who can also do some things inside the box and closer to the line of scrimmage. One of the hardest-hitting players in the country, regardless of class, and he's only a junior. And although that dimension of college football, and I guess football as a whole, is not entirely present anymore, I don't think you're allowed, right, to make those big hits. I think he still carries himself in that way where he's able to make tackles and I think in a way make statements over the middle of the field. So he's a terrific ball hawk type of player who's a really sound tackler, really smart, and would fit right into what Georgia likes to do in that secondary. If we saw what they did last night against TCU, they were flying to the football, and Peyton Woodyard is certainly one of those players that can step in there and they won't be able to skip a beat.
All right, our next question from Purple Pony. Are there any 2024 recruits that you think Oregon fans should keep an eye on?
Well, we mentioned Dylan Raiola earlier, right? And I think Steve is right on cue there because they need a big-time quarterback in this class. After losing Dante Moore so close to the finish line, Dan Lanning has everything else going for him, right? He's a defensive-minded head coach who loves to recruit. and he recruits the defensive side of the ball spectacularly. We saw him close the way he did on signing day. And I would have to think that Oregon will be one of those programs that makes its strongest push for Dylan Raiola to try to get him up to Eugene and say, hey, look, this is going to be your program in the future. We had Dante Moore in the fold. He was going to be the face of this program, but now, you can be that guy. So I would look at Dylan Raiola, especially after the miss at quarterback. They got Austin Novosad late, but Dylan Raiola is in a different tier, a different echelon, and a different stratosphere, if you want to call it. And I think they need a big time quarterback. They haven't really had one since Justin Herbert.
Mm-hmm. All right, and our final question. Everybody's asking about this guy. Does Bama have a real chance with Deuce Robinson?
I don't think so. I think right now, if I had to gauge things, it's Georgia, Texas, and USC in that top three. He did take an official visit to Alabama, but I just don't see how the Crimson Tide are able to make up as much ground as they have to make up for these other programs that appear to be in the driver's seat for Deuce Robinson. He actually started his basketball season this week. He is scheduled to be arriving in Honolulu this coming weekend for the Polynesian Bowl, and then he could take one final visit to Oregon before making his decision on February 1st. Right now, my crystal ball is on Georgia. USC, a very close second. That's a really tight battle, but watch out for Oregon. Texas still in there with Arch Manning making a strong push as always for him, but I just don't see him ending up at Tuscaloosa.
All right. Good stuff, Blair. Thank you, everybody, for sending in those questions. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the College Football Recruiting Show. Please like and share this video and subscribe to the 24 Sports YouTube channel to keep content like this coming. For Blair Angulo, I'm Grace Remington. We'll see you Thursday. Have a good night.